determination, and this is then compared among all the 4 computers.
Right.
Okay, if 3 of the computers say one number and the 4th computer says something else, they kick that guy out of the set.
Yeah.
Okay?
So really what we're talking about is flying it.
It flies it.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, during landing, when the crew takes over the machine, they're flying it in the sense that it goes where they tell it to. But the commands don't go straight to the control surfaces, they go to the computer.
All right, we'll be back with more of all of this. Thanks very much, Joe Kerwin. If you make John understand, it makes us all understand. We'll be back after this. This is Today on NBC.
Jonathan Martin. Jonathan Martin. Jonathan Martin.
No one dresses a woman like Jonathan Martin.
There's a pack of candidates running for governor of New Jersey. They all represent more of what we've had. All of them except one.
Don Land. That's why Brendan Byrne didn't want me to run for governor, because I'm not at all satisfied with the way things are. Listen, we're all against crime, toxic waste, and higher transportation costs. We're all for lower taxes, better education, more jobs, and a more efficient government. But government can best serve the people of New Jersey, not by throwing more money at every problem, but by getting lean and getting tough.
In just 1 year, this carpet cutting machine makes over 60,000 cuts in different sizes for more than 60,000 Kaufman carpet customers. But the best cut of all is when Kaufman cuts prices right in half for our half-price warehouse broadloom clearance. This $7.99 textured nylon cut to $3.99. This $11.99 plush polyester Saxony cut to $5.99, and much, much more. Come save 50% and get a bargain you'll never forget. Friday and Saturday at Kaufman, the carpet expert.
Come and meet those dancing feet on the avenue I'm taking you to 42nd Street.
Did you think the big Broadway musical was gone forever? It's back. It's 42nd Street. The glitter, the spectacle, the glorious extravaganza. Musical comedy is back in town. 42nd Street. Only New York is bigger. At the Majestic Theater.
Well, the launch is on hold. Let's go to Chicago. Bryant Gumbel is there at home, if home is where the heart is, and that's what, Wrigley Field.
Okay, good morning, Jane. Although the baseball season opened in a number of cities yesterday, chose to be here at Wrigley Field this morning because nowhere are the hopes and dreams of opening day more accentuated than here at Wrigley Field, where the Cubs have mastered the art of defeat. The last time the Chicago Cubs won a pennant was 1945. Every team alive since then has won a pennant.
Today's game is sold out. The only tickets available for today's game are standing room tickets.
Although the first pitch was scheduled for 1:45 in the afternoon, Cubs fans were already lined up outside of Wrigley Field by 9:30 in the morning. The fans came armed with the dream that this year might be different. They share that dream with their heroes. 2 months ago, the Chicago players, like their fans, hoped and believed that the team's losing fortunes would change.
The club's going in the right way. You just don't... there was a big changeover when I got here. The whole front office was changed, and you just don't change things in 1 year. It takes a while, and I think they're going about it the right way, proving through the minor leagues and so forth. And it's starting to show up. We've got some really good-looking young ball players down here, and I think it's going to help.
I don't know. We're getting some good players over here now. We're getting guys that want to play, and young guys, and, you know, we're getting along real good right now, the guys we got. So I think some good things will come out of the season.
How far can this club go? How fast?
Well, you got to crawl, then you got to walk, then you have to run. We're in the crawling stages. We're looking forward to a good season.
Back in Chicago, the fact that the Cubs might have to crawl in '81 didn't deter the home folks. A capacity crowd poured into Wrigley Field to see and be a part of the start of something new. The ever-loyal fans and the cozy no-lights park are a part of a Cubs history that in recent years has been short on pennants, but long on unexpected excitement. For the true Cub fan, Wrigley Field is full of memories.
Landreth and Fondy both there. Landreth waits, and it drops in front of him. It dropped right between them.
That Holtzman looking down, looks to be calm. Nods his head, steps back. Here's the pitch. Fastball. He swings, ground ball to Vickers. Here's the throw. He is out. No-hitter. A no-hitter for Kenny Oakman.
There's another ball coming out from behind the plate somewhere, thus allowing two baseballs to be in play at the same time.
He swings and a drive. Liner left field. It is. There it is. Mr. Banks has just hit his 500th career homer.
Tradition, hope, excitement, a fresh start, all of this was a part of opening day at Wrigley Field. The throwing out of the first ball seemed to symbolize a break with the past, and each Cub fan shared the dream of all baseball fans that this just might be their team's year. The first inning only enriched the dream. When the New York Mets went down in 1-2-3 fashion, the Wrigley partisans screamed their approval, and all the optimism of the preseason seemed well-founded. But in the fourth inning, the Mets hit Cub fans with a double dose of bad times. Lee Mazzilli's home run staked the New Yorkers to a 1-0 lead, and 1 out later, Rusty Staub's drive put the Cubs 2 runs back. On this day, those 2 runs would be enough for victory. Though they tried and tried, the Cubs never did manage to score a run. The team's newly acquired speed was never a factor, and though the names and faces were different, these new Cubs still seemed haunted by traditional Cubby misfortunes. As the innings passed, it became apparent that this Cubs season would start like so many others had, with a defeat. Like generations of Chicago rooters before them, these Cub fans looked on in disappointment. Too young to understand the past, they knew only that the present was no bargain. When the end came, it seemed appropriate enough. As the potential tying run, Tim Blackwell struck out, and the Cubs were shut out 2-0. The time was 4:07, and optimism had given way to reality. And so, though the Cubs season is only a little less than 24 hours old, there it is, already in black and white in the Chicago Tribune. The Cubs are already in last place. With 161 games to go, there's still hope. And I guess that's what keeps Cubs fans going. I should know because I have been one for 32 years. Another gentleman who's been a devout Cub fan all of his life is White House Press Secretary James Brady, recuperating from wounds in a hospital in George Washington, D.C. We know he would have liked to have been here yesterday, so one of the things we managed to do was go into the Chicago Cubs clubhouse, that sanctuary where the heroes lie, and get a baseball signed for James Brady. We will put this little fellow in the mail along with our best wishes, the wishes of all Cub fans, that maybe, just maybe, after waiting for 36 years for a pennant, this year will be different. I guess that's what baseball is all about. It is eternally. Wait till next year. Today's show will continue right after this station break.
Saturday, the Blues go undercover to catch a rapist. Hill Street Blues.
I'm a 34B. I'm a 34B. So am I.
Bally knows even if they wear the same size bra, every woman has a different shape. So Bally has a unique custom fit system. Bras to fit your special shape, not just your size. To flatter you and make you
Pretty. Only Bally has it. So Bally bras fit your shape, not just your size.
Good morning, everyone. Well, there it is. That's the Columbia Space Shuttle orbiter out there on the pad at Cape Canaveral, the Kennedy Space Center. It's being stood up at this hour by a faulty computer, a backup computer, and what you see coming out of the top of what is the external tank, that's the gas tank for the orbiter, is a little venting, we guess. Judy Resnick, our resident expert here, an astronaut from Houston, is with us this morning, and that's what is loaded with an enormous amount of hydrogen and oxygen, and they have to let some of it off from time to time, some of the gases that build up.
That's correct.
Is that a good lay expression of what's going on?
Right.
All right. Let us tell you now what the situation is. They are in a hole. They're trying to fix the computer problem. They have just talked with the astronauts and told them they are shooting for a 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time launch time. That doesn't mean that they're going to hit that time. That's just kind of a target that they're working toward now. We continue to be in a hold of T-minus 20. These are the markers that they hit along the way so that they can go back and work on the navigational systems that have to be realigned whenever there is the delay of this kind.
Well, if the delay goes on, they're supposed to launch, they're going to try to launch now in about 2 hours, but if it goes on much longer after that, then they're going to have to recycle, as they say, take the fuel out of the external tank, and then put it back in again. And that's a very complicated business, and it will take us until Sunday. So it's possible that we may have a launch on Sunday morning rather than on Friday morning.
It's still Friday morning, right? No, it's Friday morning.
The days tend to blur, but it would be a 48-hour delay if they can't make it within the next 3.5 hours.
The astronauts now have been up for about 7 hours, and they continue to ask them if they're comfortable. And so far, no complaints that I've heard. Most of the conversation from the flight deck of the Columbia, pretty cryptic. They want the problem solved, and they said outstanding a little while ago, and it looked like they might have a 90-minute target for a launch. Let's get a report from Mike Siemens on how their day, actually their very early morning, went early this morning when they got up at about 1:30.
At 2 o'clock Eastern Time, the most dangerous part of preparing for liftoff occurred. Columbia's fuel tanks were loaded with volatile gases by remote control. There were no problems, and the countdown continued as astronauts John Young and Robert Crippen were waking up. After a 10-minute medical examination, Young and Crippen were joined by space officials while they had steak, eggs, toast, orange juice, and coffee for breakfast. On board Columbia, they'll take in 3,000 calories a day by eating rehydrated food, heated by an electric food warmer they'll bring with them. Future Space Shuttle crews and passengers will dine from a galley. Next, the astronauts got into their new shuttle spacesuits. They're lighter and easier to move around in than the ones worn by astronauts on earlier missions in space. Technicians found a minor air leak in Crippen's helmet. It was fixed on the spot. A short time later, Young and Crippen left in the van so familiar from other space flights and headed for Launch Pad 39A and the White Room. There, the closeout crew got them ready to enter the shuttle. This was the moment the two astronauts have been waiting for after 3 years of training to fly Columbia. This will be Command Pilot Young's 5th flight into space. For Crippen, his first since becoming an astronaut in 1969. They were locked inside the shuttle at 5:07 Eastern Time. But with just 9 minutes left before liftoff, two problems developed. One with a fuel cell generator, the other with a backup computer. At 7:27 Eastern Time, controllers told Young and Crippen the delay could be an hour and a half or more. Shuttle Commander Young said, "We feel like we'll be here. We're strapped in and ready to go." Ike Siemens, NBC News at the Kennedy Space Center.
All right, we are now listening to we're watching John Chancellor listening to Hugh Harris from the Kennedy Space Center.
Let's just go in and pick it up now
Talking
and see
to each
what...
other properly. At the present time, work is underway to get ready for the pre-flight alignment of the inertial measurement unit. That comes at the T-minus 51-minute point in the count. However, that's approximately 91 minutes from a liftoff. We're in the process now of resetting the clock back to the 1 hour T-minus 60-minute point in the countdown. However, the setting of the clock does not necessarily mean that that is exactly how long it's going to be before a liftoff. So we're standing by here as they continue to discuss the problem and work the problem. This is Shuttle Launch Control.
Well, there you have it. What we didn't hear, Tom, was that he was saying that work was underway to redump, that's a word we ought to explain, to take some material out of that backup computer. They're doing that again. They are also at the same time making an assessment of the function of this computer and how it's relating to the other four and the inability to communicate. And they confirmed what we had heard earlier. The earliest launch of the space shuttle today would be no earlier than 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. They are resetting the clock. You've heard that, to get the inertial
inertial measurement units.
Inertial measurement units realigned, the gyroscopes in that realigned. So that's where we stand now. We're waiting.
Yeah. Judy, it sounds very tentative to me at this point.
I think it is. All we can say right now is that they're cycling back to the point where they're going to try again, start the countdown again, and see what happens.
But there's no indication that they've solved the problem, certainly.
No, I don't think so. I think they're going to retry. I don't think they know exactly what the problem is at the present time. That's why they're going to retry.
All right. We're going to continue with our coverage here of the delayed launch of the Columbia Space Shuttle, and then we'll get more news from Jane Pauley in New York after this.
The secret of this mysterious drop of oil of Olay is that it's similar to the natural fluids your skin had so much of when it was younger. As your skin ages, it loses those vital fluids, disturbing nature's delicate balance. Oil of Olay penetrates quickly to revive the radiant look your skin had when it was younger. Discover the secret of Oil of Olay. It can help you look younger, too.
Man's destiny lies somewhere in the stars. Two things will help him keep that rendezvous. The space shuttle takes off like a rocket, lands like an airplane, and gigantic space stations completely self-sustaining in Earth orbit. Destined to be on board, Tang Instant Breakfast Drink with its delicious natural orange flavor and full day's supply of vitamin C in every glass. Good nutritious Tang for spacemen and Earth families.
Would you believe you could grow big, delicious tomatoes like these in plain white sand like this? I'm John Cameron Swayze. They're doing it here at this famous university. How? With Stern's Miracle Grow plant food. In plain sand, in any soil, Miracle Grow consistently outperformed the other types of plant food. That's why in your backyard, Miracle Grow guarantees you more vegetables, more flowers than any other type of plant food. For a miracle garden, Miracle Grow.
So the Space Shuttle launch has been delayed. The earliest it could go now is 10:30 Eastern Time, if it does in fact go. Here is some of the other news of the day. The Navy says that one of its nuclear-powered submarines, the George Washington, accidentally rammed a Japanese cargo ship that sank to the bottom of the East China Sea, about 40 miles from Japan. 2 crewmen are missing. Other crew members from the sunken ship reported that a submarine had surfaced briefly after the collision but left the area almost immediately. The survivors were rescued this morning after spending 18 hours in open lifeboats. Funeral services for World War II hero General Omar Bradley have been scheduled for Tuesday at the National Cathedral in Washington, with burial to follow at Arlington National Cemetery. This weekend, the body of General Bradley will lie in state at Fort Bliss, Texas, his home for the past few years. A report from Jeff Gates of KTSM TV.
The body of the nation's last five-star general arrived in El Paso Thursday afternoon aboard the presidential jet America, less than 24 hours after he suffered a fatal heart attack while in New York City. General Bradley's widow was met by Fort Bliss Commander Major General and Mrs. John Oblinger. Earlier in the day, an 82-man contingent from the Presidential Honor Guard arrived and was on hand to take the flag-draped coffin from the plane and place it in a civilian hearse. While at Fort Bliss, the general's body will be in repose at the Main Post Chapel. The chapel will remain open on a 24-hour basis for the general public to pay their final respects. To the men who served under him during World War II, the GI's general was indeed a legend and was the last of the great military leaders of that era. Although he was confined to a wheelchair, he remained very active. While at Fort Bliss, a post he chose to spend his final years, he rarely missed an opportunity to visit with his troops. The passing of this great soldier will be mourned by many. Jeff Gates for NBC News.
Here's Cliff Morrison. Let's take a look at the weather.
Yeah, looks good today. We have a little bit of everything across the nation, and of course the weather is still looking good for Cape Canaveral, and you can see clear skies down there. At least the weather is going okay today. Throughout southwestern Texas, a little bit of storm activity down there, some showers, and also into Illinois. Some showers, too. Now, here is going to be the big weather maker. This system is moving to the east. Severe thunderstorms later on this morning and later on this afternoon running into tonight. Moving to the east. Some foggy weather this morning. A lot of it should be burning off by noon, but we have some throughout Louisiana and into the mid-Atlantic coastal areas, especially in the valleys. And that, of course, will be just a temporary situation. Cooler weather to the northwest and into the north-central part of the states. And a real hot day with a lot of sunshine throughout the southwest. Well, what's the weather going to be like for your area? The local forecast is what we're going to check right now.
The weather for the tri-state area will be sunny today. A high of 65, cloudy tonight with a low in the 50s, and a chance of showers tomorrow with a high of 65.
Caribou, Maine had a high of 71 yesterday. That was a record. They'll be lucky if they get up to 54 today. That's quite a change. And now back to Jane.
And we're going to recycle ourselves back down to the Cape here in a moment, but first a station break.
Saturday night returns to the land of the live this week on NBC.
Duke Ellington's Sophisticated Ladies has opened on Broadway, and the critics love it madly. Frank Rich of the New York Times raves it's pure musical gold. Douglas Watt of the New York Daily News raves it's a sleek song and dance show with flash and class and lusty singing. I loved it madly. And Dennis Cunningham raves, take the A train, a yellow cab, or a rickshaw, but do get there. See Duke Ellington's Sophisticated Ladies, starring Gregory Hines, Judith Jameson, and Phyllis Hyman at the Lunfontaine. Call charge at 944-9300.
America's first space shuttle. Frank Field reports on News 4 New York.
Eastern Standard Time this morning, approximately an hour and a half from now.
This is Hugh Harris from the Kennedy Space Center
During this period,
Cape Canaveral, Florida, bringing us up to date on the situation here.
Pre-flight alignment of the inertial measurement unit, one of the time-critical factors in the launch. At the same time, we will be continuing to troubleshoot the problem with the communications between the backup computer and the other flight computers on board the orbiter, hoping that the solution will be found and that we will be able to proceed to the launch at 20 minutes after 10 Eastern Standard Time. This is Shuttle Launch Control.
Tom, let me say first, I don't think he means 20 minutes after 10. Because they're going to start the clock at 9:50. And
that would be an hour and 30 minutes.
Well, then 20 minutes after 10.
Right, it's not, yeah, I think he means 10:20. They were talking in the area of 10:30, and but what's important for you all to understand is that that's just a target at this time. They have not solved the problem.
That's
As you heard him say, we will continue to troubleshoot the computer problem. They still have problems with the fifth backup computer. It's not communicating properly with the 4 primary computers on board. It is a fail-safe computer that has failed, as we have been saying some this morning. They probably wouldn't need it in the course of this flight, but they don't want to go up there without it, is what the situation is. In the meantime, they also have to realign the IMUs on board. These are navigational aids, the inertial measurement units. Judy, it sounds like the frustration just goes on.
Well, that's what it sounds like. But everybody's working hard, and we're trying to get it going.
And I was just going to say, we're in a very iffy position now in terms of the launch today, I think. Go either way.
Yeah. Around noon is the outside limit for all of this. That as we've been talking about a window, as they like to describe it, of about 6 hours altogether, because what happens is you get darkness at the other end during the landing, and they don't want to have that.
That's correct.
That's going to be tough enough in broad daylight, it seems to me, or at least it spooks me a little bit as I look at it.
It's very broad daylight out there now, and Robert Bazell has a guest for us in the VIP area. Robert?
Hello again. With me now, John, is Dr. Brian O'Leary, who was an astronaut for a while, even though he never took a space flight. Dr. O'Leary now is an expert. He writes on the subject of what space holds for us in the future. Dr. O'Leary, good morning. And
good morning.
We assume that the shuttle is going to go someday, if not this morning, someday soon. What does this mean for us, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's going to be the most important single event in the history of the space program, because once the shuttle starts flying routinely, we're going to be able to haul huge tonnages into orbit. And what I mean huge tonnages, I'm talking about thousands of tons. This will enable us to build an industrial base in space.
What would an industrial base in space do for us that all our industry here on Earth isn't going to do for us?
Well, first, smaller things like communication satellites, pharmaceuticals, ball bearings, manufacturing things. But later on, what I see is an explosive renaissance in the 1990s, which is nothing less than removing the limits to growth of our very finite planet. By that I mean mining the moon and the asteroids, building huge solar collectors in space to provide energy to the Earth, growing food in space, recovering it on the Earth.
But one of the things that we've heard a lot about the shuttle is that it's going to be used a lot for military uses, and part of this building in space we hear is going to be for future stations for space warfare, a new era of threatening warfare. Isn't that part of the problem?
Well, right or wrong, better or worse, the Cold War is alive and well, and the military rationales and the political rationales, just like around the time of Sputnik, may be the unwitting foot in the door toward an economic renaissance. With the Soviet Union, their space program, they're going to be having a 12-man permanent space station by 1985. They're going to have a booster that's twice the thrust of the Apollo Saturn V by 1983. These are the kinds of Sputnik type of events and the atmosphere of the Cold War that I think will get us into this renaissance that I'm talking about. And this means space colonies, people exploring the planets firsthand. I see it all turning around sometime in the 1980s. And the reason for this is not only because of fear and because of foreign pressures. It's because there's an increasing awareness among Americans that our space program needs to get back off the ground.
And you think the shuttle is bringing us there?
The shuttle is the truck that's going to be able to bring us there. But we need more than the shuttle. We need to put things into the shuttle.
Okay, I think there's some people at least planning to do that. Dr. O'Leary, thank you for coming by. Tom?
Thank you, Bob. Dr. O'Leary. So far, our truck is stalled in its parking place here this morning at Cape Canaveral, the Kennedy Space Center, as they continue to work on the backup computer problem. They are now giving us a tentative launch time of 10:20 a.m. Eastern Time. That's in, 1 hour and 30 minutes altogether. Jane Pauley will be back here in just a few moments talking with the first woman to ever head the commandants at a U.S. military academy. But first, this word.
John Brody in Michigan City, Indiana. As Jamar Ruby celebrates 65 years making men comfortable. Like the Ruby Limited coat, so unique it's patented. Try it on. You'll say it's lighter, fits trim, and is it ever comfortable. The Ruby Limited coat from Michigan City, men's comfort capital for 65 years. See the Ruby Limited at these and other fine stores. You've got to try it on.
Natural break, a Nature Valley break.
After a 5-mile spin,
It's time for a break.
Nature Valley granola bars, a natural break.
100% natural, no additives, no preservatives in this tasty, crunchy snack.
That's for us. There's oats and honey, cinnamon, coconut, peanuts,
And almond. Take a natural break, a Nature Valley break.
Give it a whirl.
Nature Valley granola bars.
Lots of families worry about money, but not us, because we're not alone.
We belong to a credit union, and we use it.
My paycheck goes straight in. It's like keeping the money in the family, because the members own the credit union.
And credit unions aren't out to make a profit.
That's why I got a low rate on my car loan.
That's why I get high interest on my savings. We're a strong family, and we're part of one that's even stronger.
America's Credit Unions. A family 44 million strong.
Just a few years ago, it was considered very big news when women were admitted to the military academies. Well, a few months ago, it went almost unnoticed when the Air Force Academy named a woman as its top-ranking student officer. Cadet Wing Commander Michelle Johnson is the first woman to reach this level in the history of the military academies. Well, now it's her job to see to it that the 4,200 other cadets toe the mark, follow the regulations. And we're very honored to have Wing Commander Michelle Johnson with us this morning. Our congratulations.
Well, thank you.
You are 22 years old.
That's right.
Which means that you're really too young to remember the beginning of the space program. Mercury, Gemini, you joined us roughly for Apollo, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Just in terms of memory. John Glenn, for instance, would be prehistoric to someone your age.
Fairly much so, yes, I'm afraid.
So that you didn't go to the academy because you had been somehow touched, moved, or inspired by the space program, really?
Not particularly, no.
Why did you go?
Well, I was looking at the academy's program. The all-around purpose is to somehow create a well-rounded graduate who can go into the world, especially into the Air Force, and be able to participate actively.
Not necessarily in the wild blue yonder.
Not necessarily.
But something happened to you recently, and not because you became wing commander, the top student officer. What, you learned to fly?
I did. I participated in a soaring program at the academy, and also in a light plane program, a sort of a preparatory program to actual pilot training. And I caught the flying bug, if you will.
How seriously?
Well, after 2 years at Oxford, which will follow my graduation from the academy, I would like to attend pilot training.
Oh, did I not mention? Frankly, we had trouble in introducing Michelle Johnson. She has a resume and credentials and so forth this long. We'd be here all morning. That includes you...
must be completed before we get into the final phases of the launch countdown. That occurs, the transition between the flight or the launch programs occurs at the T-minus 20-minute point. In parallel with the work which is going on now with the IMU and other aspects of the launch vehicle, the computer people are comparing the program which was in the backup flight computer to assure themselves that the proper program had been placed in the computer. At the same time, a determination must be made that that is the proper program and that there are no problems with it, and then that it does communicate properly with the other 4 flight computers on board the orbiter. So at the present time, we are again counting, looking for a liftoff at 10:20 a.m. this morning. The countdown at T-minus 56 minutes, 49 seconds, and counting. This is Shuttle Launch Control.
All right, you have the word there. The clock now at 56 minutes and 38 seconds and counting, but that does not mean we are that far away from a launch, or that close to a launch, I should say, because there is another 20-minute built-in hold, and they are aiming now for a launch at 10:20 a.m. Eastern Time this morning. But as Gene Cernan has pointed out, still quite a few things have to happen before that actually can take place, and they are really kind of coming close to the outer edge here of the time when they will be able to launch today before deciding to postpone the first mission of the spaceship Columbia until at least Sunday. Gene Cernan, what did you make of that last announcement?
Well, pretty much as we had discussed, I just heard the crew talking to the test conductor, Frank. I've been listening to the crew most of the morning, and they're very much aware of what the problem is that they're trying to solve. The details of the problem, they don't know, obviously, any more than the ground does. But again, this count is set up to stretch us, I think, to the limits of our ability to launch today. I'm just waiting for the key when someone says, hey, we know what the problem is. Now we've got to find out if we can solve it within that given period of time. That 10:20 probably has several minutes on either side of it once we find a problem. But the key to watch for is the problem itself, and then we'll decide whether we can go with it.
And we have not yet had that announcement. Thank you, Gene. Now, the question arises, does this delay affect the fuel in the boosters? And the boosters are developed, of course, under the control of the Marshall Space Flight Center at Huntsville, Alabama, and our correspondent Al Dale is there right now. Al, what about it?
Frank, the people you see in this room are scientists and technicians who are concerned with the ascent system. And the people here in Huntsville say that the rockets and the external tank involved in the ascent system have not been affected by the delay. They expect to be ready to go.
Well, there it is. You paid for it. Take a look at it. $10 billion worth of space hardware still on the launching pad here at the Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral. It cannot get off the ground because there is a problem with one of the computers, at least one of the computers that they continue to work on here at the Kennedy Space Center, also at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, and on board the Columbia Space Orbiter, where Robert Crippen and John Young have been there now for several hours. They had hoped for a launch time of 6:50 this morning. That has been rescheduled till 10:20 Eastern Time this morning, about an hour and 25 minutes from now. That does not mean that they'll necessarily get off the ground then, because the fact is they've not solved the problem with those computers. They are also in the process of realigning, or recycling, as they say, the inertial measurement units. Those are the onboard navigational systems in the black boxes. So that's kind of where we are at this time.
Well, and what we're doing is the astronauts have been in the Columbia now for about 4¼ hours. They are lying on their backs on airline seats with their feet in the air, as you would if you turned a chair over, and they seem to be perfectly fine, and they're in superb shape. But it has been a long time waiting, and the countdown now is going back to redoing things that were being done here at the Cape at between 4 and 5 o'clock this morning. So this is a very serious hold, and as Tom says, no guarantee that they'll fix the problem with the computers and that the Columbia will be able to lift off.
There was something said just a few moments ago by Hugh Harris here. It said that they're going to compare the computer program to make sure that a proper program had been placed in the computer. Is there a possibility that they put the wrong program in that backup computer?
I don't think that's quite exactly what it means. It's you want to make sure that all parts of the program were transferred correctly without any errors when it was transferred from the mass memory unit into the computer.
Okay. This is Judy Resnick, one of our resident expert astronauts with us this morning. We'll obviously continue our coverage of the delayed launching of the Columbia Space Shuttle right after this station break.
Friday, Stella plays Bonnie to a modern-day Clyde on Harper Valley. Next, Wally helps Philip change his image on the Brady Brides. Then, on Nero Wolfe.
My father was murdered.
A mysterious death and some priceless dolls threaten Nero's life. It all happens Friday on NBC.
Don't miss Levitt's big pre-Easter furniture sale. Check the newspaper for dozens and dozens of bargains in famous brand furniture from every department. Now at the Levitt showroom near you.
A lot of ice creams can tell you they're all natural, even though they put in stabilizers or thickeners like gums and gelatin. At Breyers, we pledge that our ice cream contains none of those things. Breyers uses nothing but ripe fruit, pure sugar, wholesome milk, and thick cream. There just isn't any other ice cream that's more all-natural than Breyers.
There is a land of promise, a land of sun and showers, and in that land of promise, we grow our golden sunflowers.
The natural goodness of sunflower oil is in every bite of Promise margarine.
Promise tastes fresh and light.
And sunflower oil is high in polyunsaturates and has no cholesterol.
There is a land of promise, a land of golden sunflowers.
Billy D. Williams and Gore Vidal, today, live at 5.
Good morning, everyone. This is Today. It is Friday, April the 10th, and you have not overslept necessarily this morning. This is a special prolonged version of Today. As we continue our coverage from Cape Canaveral, the Kennedy Space Center, you are looking at the Columbia orbiter of the Space Shuttle system still on the ground, now about 2 hours and 10 minutes past its originally scheduled launch time. We're looking at a launch time now of about 1 hour and 20 minutes from now. But there's still a problem, and it has not been solved. And the problem is in a backup computer system. We have been talking about it at length. They have been working on it now for more than 2 hours, and yet they've not been able to come up with a solution to the problem. Hello, I'm Tom Brokaw here with John Chancellor and with Joe Kerwin, one of the astronauts from Houston who's with us. He was a veteran of the Skylab mission, also an MD. Joe was just saying a few moments ago, you think that they maybe have a plan for dealing with this problem. We were just told, let me just bring one little piece of news here. Just as we came back on the air, they were talking about going ahead and starting the realignment of the IMUs, the navigational aids that we've talked about all morning. That'll take another 48 minutes, they say. To do that, that means at about 9:48 they'll finish that.
But that's really not what's the main thing. The main thing is to decide if the computers, that backup computer, can talk to the other computers with any harmony at all.
Let's ask the question that we were just asking off the air, which is, once they have figured out what the problem is, how long will it take them to determine whether or not their answer is correct by having them talk to each other and reloading and everything?
Well, it's hard to say because most of the work now has been going on off the loop, if you've noticed, for the last hour or so. It's gone into the hands of the experts. But I think that they came up with a plan an hour or so ago to manipulate that software, identify a fault, verify a clean load, and load it into the onboard computer. And they told George Page it would take X minutes, and he set his new liftoff clock to that time. That doesn't mean that they necessarily will succeed, but it means if they do succeed, it'll take that long. And once they have it loaded in the computer, I think all they need to do is bring the computer up, mode it to the launch mode, and look at the CRT, and if everything checks out...
Let's back up and break that down just a little bit.
We get a little ahead of ourselves here?
Well, not ahead of ourselves, but I think that we got into a language that you're very familiar with, and the rest of us aren't necessarily.
I understood you perfectly, but we have to carry Tom on.
Yeah, that's right. It's John's turn to get me.
Okay.
It's John's turn to get me in this. In this case, let's back up to that point of once they identify... Would it have been an error in the data of some kind or an improper loading?
It may have been something as simple as a 0 that should have been a 1 or a 1 that should have been a 0 when they loaded the software into the computer, that the load didn't take quite perfectly, okay?
Although, you know, Joe, there is one question that if I were covering the briefing that they're going to have on this, I would certainly ask, and that is that the launch control told us that one portion of that software program, one set of information had never been run before. And maybe that was just a mix-up, but that's something that people are obviously going to ask about.
Oh, yeah, they're going to ask that, and I would be very curious about it, too, but we haven't heard enough about it to speculate.
That information goes in what I think they call kilobits per second. I mean, it really goes fast.
That's right.
Thousands and thousands.
There are literally several million ones and zeros.
So do you think that you could load a computer, you take stuff out of it, have a look at it, design a program or jigger something around, and send it back into the computer in thousands of little bits of information per second in, what, a half an hour?
Oh, much less than that. You can load one of those computers in a couple minutes. And in fact, the crew does it on board during the flight. From the mass memory unit into the computer, doesn't take long at all, if they find the problem.
Joe, when they talk about the troubleshooters that work on this, who are they talking about?
They're talking about computer experts at Houston who run the software development lab, and their contractor experts from IBM and in this case Rockwell and their subs who have developed that program software. They are running that software, simulating the pre-launch period and trying to identify which word or which bit in that word is inaccurate and is giving them the wrong solution.
All right, we're going to go to Houston now, where we have Roy Neal standing by in NBC's version of the flight deck. It looks a lot like it, but if Roy pushes a lot of switches and a lot of buttons, the difference is he won't get off the ground, but he will get on the air this morning with our help. Roy, how are you?
I think we're on now. Thank you, Tom, with Colonel Gordon Fullerton, who with me has been listening avidly, waiting for things to happen. Gordon, what's going on right now here in Houston?
I think, as Joe just explained, the action is all in the back rooms, not in the primary control room. We have the primary flight controllers watching their systems, which are still all go, but waiting for word from the software experts as to what the problem is and what the fix might be.
You know, I was intrigued. We've got this nice reproduction of a flight deck. I was intrigued by something you were telling me a little bit ago, which is how the astronauts actually use that backup computer. What flight controls are used and what controls they might be working with right now. Could you give us some small idea, just using some of our hardware here, to show what that software is not doing?
All right. The primary flight software is in the first 4 of the 5 computers, and the backup software is in the 5th one. The first 4 are normally the ones actually flying the aircraft, but the backup is following along, listening to the data being processed by the primary, and that's the basic problem this morning. It's only listening on half of the communication paths that of the 4 that it should be. It's only listening on 2.
That problem didn't even show up till they were about 9 minutes down on the count at that planned hold, did it? That's about
correct.
when it showed up.
But that's when we actually mode into to the launch software, and where this 4 working the problem and the backup listening configuration is first initiated, and that's why it didn't show up till then. Now, generally, the crew will keep this center display of the 3 television cathode ray tube displays assigned to the backup computer so that they can watch its status and its opinion of how the launch is going while they're on the way up.
So that's really what they're focused on now, although our display has nothing to do with their display at the moment.
That's correct.
And
if anything goes wrong then with the primary set, and it's determined that it cannot adequately complete the launch trajectory, the crew would engage this backup computer by pressing this red button found on top of the control stick.
Well, let's hope that a little later today they will be able to press that red button and thereby activate a backup computer that would work when, as, and if they get around to a flight status.
Hopefully they won't have to use it, but we want a healthy one in case they do.
Absolutely. Tom, let's get back
Colonel.
to you.
Thank you, Roy Neal. We're back here at the Kennedy Space Center, and let us show you how the time is being passed by some notables. That's the governor of Florida. That's Governor Robert Graham out there in his shirt sleeves playing catch. In fact, he's about 20 yards away from where we're sitting right here. You can look out the window and see him as well. A lot of people have been out here for many hours. Now, I know NASA is not thinking about us and the discomfort or the impatience of the folks who are looking in. They've got problems of their own. The governor of the state of Florida obviously is here. A lot of congressmen have come down for the launch as well. A lot of friends of the contractors on this mission. They've all been here since, about 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock this morning because the traffic was so bad. We'll have continuing coverage of the delayed launch of the Columbia Space Shuttle from the Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral. But now we're going to go back to New York, where Jane Pauley has more news for us. Jane?
Thank you, Tom. And the MVP, the most important person, President Reagan, up early this morning, and he has been following the coverage of the Space Shuttle and its problems this morning. We'll get more on the President from Bill Lynch, who is at the White House. Morning, Bill.
Good morning again, Jane. The President got up about 15 minutes before the scheduled launch of the Columbia, but he, like many millions of Americans, were disappointed that it did not get off on time. He's been watching the continuing coverage on television in his hospital room, but meantime has found time to have a 20-minute meeting with his Chief of Staff, Jim Baker, and key aide, Mike Deaver. He took a walk at about 7:25 up and down the hallway outside his room, and then he sat down to enjoy a breakfast of granola and juice and coffee. The President's key aides are now making plans for him to leave the hospital. We expect him to come home possibly tomorrow.
And counting. At the present time, we have had approximately 10 minutes of the beginning of the pre-flight alignment of the inertial measurement unit. The clock is running in a way in which we will come out at a T0 and a liftoff at 10:20 a.m. this morning. Everything going very smoothly as we have recycled our countdown clock and are catching up with those tasks which need to be done in order to bring us back in a configuration to support the launch. We have not heard back yet as to the validity of the backup flight software, which is being compared at the present time in Houston at the Johnson Space Center. And we're standing by to hear that and expect to hear it approximately a half hour from now. At the present time, we're working towards a liftoff at 10:20 a.m. this morning. This is Shuttle Launch Control.
Well, that was Hugh Harris telling us some interesting information, but not really giving us the information that we're all waiting for, because obviously he doesn't have it. He said we are still waiting for word about the backup flight computer, the validity of it, as he put it, to determine whether it is operational and whether it is in accordance with the other computers on board the orbital system, the orbiter. And until that determination is made, this countdown may not have all that much meaning. The clock shows 38 minutes, 25 seconds to liftoff, but as we've reminded you, that does not mean that that is the actual time till the launch, because there are a couple of holes built in, and they are still aiming for a 10:20 a.m. launch, 10:20, a little more than an hour or so from now. But they have not yet been able to determine whether the computer malfunction or the computer disorder is going to be fixed in proper time for them to actually make that target launch time. Well, a few minutes ago, we heard from Rebecca Chase talking with some of the citizens who have come from far and wide and have been waiting for hours and hours to see the space shuttle. Many of them are a good distance removed from the actual launch site. They're some 13, 14 miles away. People out on the beach will have a pretty good view of it, and some of them are even farther away than that. But there are, of course, as is usually the case, some VIPs here, a section specially reserved for visiting dignitaries, members of Congress, and celebrities of one sort or another. And Lynn Shure is spending her time with them for a few moments this morning. Lynn, how are the big shots taking the delay?
Very much like the little folks on the beach, Frank. In fact, what they share with them is that a number of people down here at the VIP section are stretched out on plastic bags, on paper brown bags, all kinds of things, just taking in a little bit of the sun. As you mentioned, this is one of the best views of this shuttle. When it goes off, it's right down here in front of our anchor position. These people are going to get a terrific view. And as you say, there are a number of Congress people here. We have Governor Brown of California, a number of former astronauts. We are told that Treasury Secretary Reagan is here, which would make him the highest ranking member of the Reagan administration. We have some regular old celebrities here. George Lucas, who made the movie Star Wars, John Denver, the singer. And there are also a number of people here who are relatives of or members of families or people who worked in the industries who built the shuttle itself. and they're here watching to make sure that what they build is really going to go up okay. I should tell you something else, Frank. We, for the last hour or so, we're over at the VAB, which is the Vehicle Assembly Building, that great big huge building over on the other side. We went over there because we were going to go up on the roof after launch. At this point, we're back here, and security will make it probably so that we can't get back there. But right now over there are a number of folks who work for Martin Marietta sitting around, in fact, watching our coverage of this, and they are all just crossing their fingers, hoping it's going to go off in time, too. So all over the place, everybody is watching. Frank?
Thank you, Lynn. The famous and the not-so-famous, and who knows, maybe even the infamous. But a space shuttle launch or any kind of a space flight always attracts all sorts of people. As a matter of fact, this is a rather interesting part of the country, a part of the state of Florida, because there's so much technological expertise gathered here, one kind of people, and then there's the other part of Cape Canaveral, where some old-line Floridians have lived for a long time, and with the advent of the space age, of course, there's been an influx of many newcomers, too. So it's become a sort of a magnet for people from all over the country, and Jules Bergman, who has spent a great deal of time down here, has a look now at what you might call the two faces of the Cape. Jules?
This is where it all began, Pad 5 at Cape Canaveral, where astronaut Alan Shepard became America's first man to get into space. Today, an identical capsule and rocket stand on the same pad where Shepard blasted off nearly 20 years ago. There are no manned flights any longer here at the older part of the Cape. The Shepard launch area is the heart of the Air Force's Space Museum. Looking north, beyond this historic area, the older launch pads come into view. Pad 14, where John Glenn began orbital flights for this country.
3, 2, 1, 0. Godspeed, John Glenn.
Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway. You're loud and clear. Roger. A little bumpy along about here.
Gemini and the beginnings of two-man flight, as well as rendezvous and docking. Pad 19, where it all happened. It's hard to believe this is all that's left. We reached fast and far to get to the moon with Apollo, and there were problems. Pad 34, where the first Apollo crew was killed by fire during a final ground test. Then it all moved further north to Pad 39 and the new Cape, Merritt Island. It was here where the Saturn moon rockets were assembled in this huge building and where Americans began their historic journeys to the moon. Today, nearly 6 years after the last manned flight, the shuttle stands ready to hurl a new generation into space against a backdrop rich with the glories and disappointments of yesterday.
Thank you, Jules. Very interesting report indeed. Well, Pad 39A is very active, and that is where Space Shuttle Columbia reposes right now, still waiting for a launch. We expect to hear in a few seconds from launch control. We understand they'll talk to us in a few seconds to give us an update. You see the countdown clock, 32 minutes and 7 seconds. But we're actually aiming for a 10:20 launch. We may find out more about it now from launch control.
This is Shuttle Launch Control at T-minus 31 minutes, 55 seconds, and counting. Many of the activities which normally fit into this particular part of the countdown have already been performed, and therefore there's not as many being happening as had been previously. We are still in the mode of pre-alignment of the inertial measurement units and are looking for liftoff approximately 10:20 a.m.
So pretty soon, because of the astronauts' own pressure, this word capsule disappeared, and the thing became known as a spacecraft. Now, I understand, and I'm sure Joe Kerwin could, if he's willing to, could fill us in on this.
Well, let's see if he's willing to. He's listening.
There's been quite a, actually, a behind-the-scenes fight, as I understand it, among the older astronauts particularly, to have a little more control of this Columbia spacecraft.
Yes.
Now we've got 5 computers, 4 of which are working this morning, and the 5th computer is kind of like an arbiter for the other 4. And there's been a kind of argument of whether or not there should be a white room atmosphere in the spacecraft.
What do you think, Joe Kerr, when you're listening?
Fine, we had a distraction.
Oh, well,
I wanted to ask Tom, do scientists, astronauts have the right stuff? Your book didn't say anything.
I noticed you, Joe. I noticed you walking around with that fighter jock roll in your walk.
Carefully copied.
Joe, Tom Wolfe was asking the question about whether or not they were fighting for more control of the Columbia space, whether they wanted it to be a more flyable airplane.
This one?
Yeah, whether these guys who were going to go up in it were insisting on having a little more control, manual control of it at some point.
Yes, but I think we've got it. I think we've won most of those battles, and my view of it is that this fight, which started back in the Mercury days, gave American astronauts considerably more control over their vehicles, right through Gemini, Apollo, and now Shuttle, than the Soviet cosmonauts have ever had over theirs, and that's given us a more capable vehicle. I'm proud of us.
What about, Tom Wolfe, you've been watching Captain Robert Crippen. He has to have been cast in this role. He looks perfect as an astronaut, doesn't he?
Well, now, in a way, I have felt sorry, and now we don't have to feel sorry anymore, but for all of the people in Robert Crippen's group. He was in the last group of astronauts, the 7th group. They were people who had begun in the old manned orbital laboratory program of the Air Force. And that was going to be the military space station. This is going back now to the mid-60s. And now, almost 2 decades down the line, we're finally beginning to have this space platform that will have military applications, civilian applications, and so on. But he's had a long wait. I mean, he's 41 years old now.
Well, he's strapped in, and as they say, strapped in and ready to go if we can get this thing done today. Thank you, Tom Wolfe, for sharing your considerable insights with us. We'll be back in a moment. This is Today on NBC.